GT7 1.57 is here of course, and even though for many it's not exactly the kind of update which will really ruffle your feathers, it is of course still time as always to talk about the new stuff which we do have, any notable changes, glitches, weird stuff in the game as well. The first thing I do want to point out is something which Mav from the Discord recommended I go back and have a second look at, which was the livery editor, because it's a bit weird on these vehicles, particularly the Renault, where you cannot paint the front or rear license plate unless you paint them under the bonnet section, and under the bonnet section you cannot paint the bonnet. So it's pretty broken in terms of the livery editor on this car. Likewise with the Mazda, if you want to paint the front and rear bumper, you also have to go to the bonnet section, which makes absolutely zero sense. So that's just an interesting little tidbit to bear in mind if you are going to paint your vehicles such as I have here. The standout of the three by far is the Aston. It's the reason why I opened the video with it. It is genuinely a shockingly good car. Now for some people I'm sure you expected it to be good. For me, I don't really care for Aston Martin's newer stuff. Of course it's an Aston, so they're going to be exclusive and finally made and blah blah blah. But I guess for me I just don't really expect much from a Vantage because it's the baby Aston. So yes, the horsepower is decent, the weight is decent, the performance is decent, but I expect basically what I'd expect from like an Audi R8 or something like that in its V8 form. Nothing too special, just a nice car. The kind of vehicle which you'd enjoy more in real life, usually, than in a game. In the case of this car though, it's brilliant. It's actually fantastic. If you drive it standard straight out of the box, which you'll see me doing here in the video later on, it's a 502 horsepower car. It weighs 1,530 kilos, 210 grand to buy, so of course the most expensive of the three, and the point level is just under 600, even stock, so they give it a decent amount of respect, and it already performs and handles brilliantly. In terms of its visual upgrades, again you saw some of them at the start of the video, you can wide body it, you can put some pretty cool aero bits on there, but none of these three vehicles have quite the level of in-depth visual modification which we've seen a couple of other packs have recently, which is sort of a shame, but I'm not too surprised in the case of the Mazda and the Aston. You can make a convincing looking racer out of the Aston though, which is fun. You can drop it down to around 1100 kilos, well over 800 horsepower, and even with those numbers and racing tyres, it's still under 800 points. So potentially quite a useful car, and again in fully built form it is even better to drive. So across the board the Aston is definitely the standout here for me. I'm still not a fan of the way it looks, but the way it drives is excellent. In terms of course, the Renault Kangoo, the meme car of the three, I expected it to be something of a little track day monster, kind of a K-car style, which I'm sure is part of the reason why it has a strong following in Japanese culture. It kind of isn't. I mean, it's fine, but when you fully build it, it really cannot handle the power. I will, of course, have to further refine the tune to see if we can make it a bit better, but for the moment, it has rampant wheel spin, even on sports tyres, which probably isn't too surprising. But what's more disappointing is the steering is abnormally heavy. It's extremely bad through corners, even with no throttle at all, and using radically different approaches to the diff setup and suspension, it still isn't quite where I want it to be. In terms of its standard form, you can buy either new from the Renault dealership, which is quite laughable for a 2001 vehicle, but you can also buy it from the used dealer. The problem is though, there is absolutely no reason to buy it from the used dealer unless maybe you own one and you want the mileage to be closer to yours in real life, I guess, but it's an 18 grand car to begin with. Who needs a cheaper version? It's a bit weird. Either just do that or have it only in the used dealer, so that's a bit of a strange choice. 294 points stock, 73 horses, so again very K-car style, 1080 kilos. So it's probably a bit heavier than you'd think, nearly 1100, but fully built, you're looking at a hair under 300 horsepower, which is not bad at all for what is still a 1.4 litre, 880 kilos or so, which is more like what you'd expect from the car, and about 550 points, or just under, with sports hard tyres mind you, so that's pretty hefty. On paper, it makes sense. 300 horsepower, 880 kilos, I mean, you could easily be talking about a TVR, but the problem is it just doesn't perform like one. In fact, in the race that you'll see me using it in Brands Hatch, it struggles, to be honest, to get around corners quick enough to keep up with cars which have no way near that level of power. And that's really odd, because I did not expect that from this car. I guess from one perspective that's kind of realistic, because it was never intended really to be a performance car, but still, when you fitted racing everything, you would expect it to be a bit better than this, so I would be interesting to see if anyone else's results have varied. Of course, I have got the suspension very low, which for some cars does mess them up, so like I said, I will further refine the build. A couple of the visual mods are cute or interesting. Again, you can wide body it, it's got that kind of Renault Laguna style chin splitter, an interesting little wing on the back, and you can paint it in interesting ways. Like I said earlier on, the livery editor makes no sense when it comes to the bonnet, the number plates and the bumpers, but it can be done at least. And then of course we move on to the Mazda. Now the Mazda to me is the one of these vehicles which really brings them all together. together in terms of how you should approach this pack. To me, if you imagine this, instead of being an update, instead see it as just Gran Turismo 8 and you've just logged in and you're looking through the different dealerships, to me all three of these cars feel exactly like that. They're not the kind of cars which you'd expect to be in a DLC pack or an update, they just look like generic day one vehicles. Yes, the Aston is exotic, but it still to me looks like the kind of car you'd expect to be in the Aston Martin dealer, especially in a 2025 or beyond racing game. So to me that's what kind of all three of these feel like. It feels like the kind of update you'd have to wind down a game. And we don't really know, of course, because Polyphony tells us nothing about the time frame of events, so for all we know they could be winding the game to a close. I would imagine probably not anytime soon, because we haven't seen anything for a next game, but you never know with Gran Turismo. It's certainly not the kind of time to be releasing updates like this when Forza is coming to the PlayStation, and I certainly plan to be doing a lot of content for that, and I'm sure for many of you, you're either going to be playing it again, or perhaps for the first time, and trust me, there is a hell of a lot more to do in that game than there currently is in Gran Turismo, and that is going to hurt the amount of people playing Gran Turismo. There is no doubt whatsoever about that, regardless of your fandom, that's just a fact. Going back to the Mazda though, it is of course a front-wheel drive version. In terms of potential, in terms of tuning, it's 400 points stock, less than 30 grand to buy, 187 horses, and just under 1500 kilos, so it actually weighs less than the Aston. And fully built, it's actually not too bad. No motor swap for it yet, I wouldn't be surprised if it gets one though, and the Kangoo I would say almost certainly will get a motor swap at some point, maybe even next month. 440 horses, 1160 kilos, and curiously enough, about the same fully built point level on sports tyres as well as the Renault, which is also strange because when you compare the two cars, well, the specs of course are wildly different, but the Mazda is way better to drive. Even on the same tyres, it doesn't feel anywhere near as heavy. It has understeer for sure, but you can deal with it much more easily. It just feels like a bit of a more useful machine, as to be honest, boring as I personally find the car to be, even with 440 horsepower. I turned it into a fictional Tommy Kyra because I had to make it interesting in some kind of way, but again, I'm sure it will have its fans, but I think the Mazda is probably the car which at least some will think, I don't even care about buying it. No new circuit, we do have some new motor swaps. As always, those will feature in their own video tomorrow, and in terms of other updates, there's new scapes of course, quite a few collated into the Faroe Island scapes. Not bad ones, to be honest. I've done a couple of the thumbnails for reviews, which are coming out soon of course for the three cars. There are, as always, new career mode events, all 10 minutes worth of them that you can complete as quickly as you can buy the car basically. You barely even need to upgrade the Mazda, Renault or Aston to be honest to win those events. It's pretty easy, which again speaks to, I would say, the biggest issue which Gran Turismo still has, and it's an issue which is carried over from GT Sport and shows, to be honest, no sign of going away anytime soon, and that is this complete lack of interest which they have in making any kind of tangible quality career mode. Every single thing in career mode feels like half effort. It's mid, it's almost good, it's almost interesting, but it comes off as repetitive and rote. I mean, there's a reason why most of us tend to do Tokyo, Spa, or Le Mans over and over and over again, because it's the only things worth doing. The idea of many racing games having a decent career mode almost feels like the thing of the past, especially with the amount of esports, placement and importance and all that, which is a shame. There's also an interesting change, which was noticed on the Discord, of Michelin kind of disappearing from the game in terms of the tyres, or at least less implementation there, which is curious. So maybe they just had a set time that they were doing the sponsorship for, maybe they just didn't really see enough returns from it, as can sometimes be the case, so that's a bit of a weird one there. I haven't noticed anything crazy in terms of physics changes so far, but many of you do notice that kind of stuff if you go back to a particular car that you like to use and it's changed, so of course as always put that down below if you've noticed anything like that. And there's not really much else to talk about. There's the new Suzuki Collector's Book, and that's pretty much it to talk about when it comes to 1.57. This, in my opinion, and I'm sure for some of you you'll agree, is the exact kind of update where a circuit would have changed the complete discourse about the game. You could have kept everything else the same, including the three cars as they are, but having a circuit alone I think would have made it one of the most popular recent updates instead of what it is, which is quite honestly one which you could easily just completely skip. And like I said last time around, like I seem to say a lot recently unfortunately, you could just totally skip this month and then download like 2 or 3 of them together and have a whole bunch of cars to play with at once, instead of constantly logging in just for the sake of what feels like scraps. And yes, there are always the apologists who like to go on about it being quote-unquote free. I'm not even bothering arguing with those people anymore because we're years beyond that holding any kind of water. So that's it for my thoughts on this particular update. Of course, there will presumably be one next month, which we'll check out then, and at least we've still got special projects going, so you've got something else to do in the game if you do enjoy playing it. In the grand scheme of things though, we are not far off from Forza Horizon 5 coming out on the PS5 PS5 though, I will be playing that, and I will be featuring stuff for it on the channel, including speed builds, special projects, maybe other kinds of tuning and tips and tricks as well. And I'm sure for many of you, you're looking forward, as I am, to at least playing that as well as GT7. And for some of you, as sad as it is to say, maybe instead, especially for those who already aren't bothering to log into GT beyond just watching these reviews, to see if something is worth coming back for. It's a sad state of affairs for many of us in GT7. Tomorrow we'll be talking motor swaps, we'll also be reviewing each of the cars individually, so stick around for all of that, and for now, thanks for watching.